I went and talked to my
point
neighbor.
of
Staff?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Just so that you know, this meeting will be live streamed and video recorded for the public. Do we have any introduction of late items, Ms. Roberts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did have the opportunity to perhaps have some members of the public come in question period, but I don't think that they'll be here today, so there likely will not be any additional late items.
Okay, I would just suggest if they do show up that we would put them under, because I believe they're here to talk about 5B, which is design commercial update. I would suggest that we put them under after the presentation.
Perfect.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, if we can have the adoption of the agenda as amended.
So moved. And I just want to first recognize we are on the traditional territories of the Sunamo First Nations, and we thank them.
Oh, thank you. It wasn't in my notes, so I forgot that. Thank you. I actually use the Coast Salish people as well, so, because we have some people that are coming to us from that area.
Right.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Councillor Martin. I appreciate that reminder. So do we have adoption of the agenda as amended?
Just the adopted as circulated.
Okay. As circulated. Was Councillor Martin. Need a seconder? Seconded by Rachel. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. If I could have the adoption of the minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Markman, seconded by Rachel again. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. I would now move to the presentations. We're going to have this prescription of health, VIU and recreation, to be introduced by Richard Hardy, Manager of Parks, Recreation and Culture.
And just for Mr. Harlow's or any viewing members' purposes, this would be page 8 through 20 of the agenda.
8 through 20 of the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to bring this presentation forward, particularly to this group, this committee, because I think you'll find it very interesting. It's really a focus of prevention work of helping youth, and then we would like, as Ms. Schroeder goes into the presentation, show what we've been trying to do and what we'd continue to like to do in expanding this program. And I won't take Joanne's thunder of what it all is. Council has seen this presentation before. This group has not. We did, and Joanne will get into, we did actually get written up as a case study in a textbook in the United States. And we're very excited about the initial work and findings and looking forward to expand it and also any kind of feedback we have from the committee on how we could expand this program, and hopefully, and then also support from the committee of expanding this program. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Schroeder, who can go through the presentation.
And Ms. Schroeder, I would just like to ask, would you like questions at the time, or would you prefer us to wait until you're through your presentation?
I think through the presentation. So what I'm going to do is the first set of slides are set up on a timer. So they will continue to run through. They'll just be 20 seconds per slide. And then I've just got a few slides at the end, and happy to then slow down towards the end and answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Turn the table over to you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to share the Recreation Prescription Project. I just want to give a caveat as we start, is that the slides that you will see that are all visual pictures with no writing on them were taken by the youth that were in the project. They were done in a photo voice methodology, meaning they were all given cameras and took their own pictures of what health and wellness and inclusion and access looks like for them when they're talking about recreation to their own lives. So it's just important to mention that. Also, when we think of recreation, this project was really looks at it as an intervention. So that'll just be the start, and I'm going to share my screen and start, if that's all right. Recreation is a preventative health field. It contributes to solutions. It is solutions-based, and this project had a 360 lens in the community to address systemic issues in health and wellness and leisure access. Here we see a picture that says, "Me and my baby shark playing basketball in the outdoors." This really was a collaborative project from the start. The questions that we explored, as this was a research project, is to what extent can an intersectoral intervention of recreation prescription influence health and well-being in grade 5 students? So we were looking at how do you access health and well-being through improvements that can be attributed to the intervention, and also exploring intersectoral and interdisciplinary collaborations. There were 3 schools involved in Nanaimo. They would fall under an area of what we would consider a vulnerable population. There's a potential of an ill health trajectory for these youth. There were 120 participants, and 100 of them had consented to the research. So how did we walk this out? This was a 16-week recreation program. There were 3 critical data points for collecting information: a pre, mid, and post-program health assessment, a wellness survey, and then the youth did photographic evidence through what we call photo walls. Kids are ultimately desire to be healthy. They are innately playful, and they are curious. And at age 10, it is a complex developmental stage. Using an ecological systems approach, we know that they are embedded in interacting in the community, individual peers within their family and within their community and school. The goals of the project were embedded in the National Recreation Framework for Canada, addressing social connectedness, physical activity, and mental health, which we like to call mental fitness. The priorities for the project included active transportation, connection to nature, inclusion and access, collaborative systems, access to food, nutrition, and a digital detox approach. And it really was also addressing capacity development in emerging professionals. Those emerging professionals became what we called healthy role models. They were an interdisciplinary group of VIU students coming from child and youth care, nursing, physical education, recreation, education, and we strive for a 1-to-4 relationship within our program. Thumbs up for collaboration. This was made possible, this project, through Island Health Wellness Grant. It included School District 68, City of Nanaimo Parks, Recreation and Culture, VIU, and primary care providers in the community. So what did we actually do? Recreation is more than just fun and games. When it is planned purposefully and intentionally, it has power. Power to influence and contribute to broader social agenda within our communities. Children were involved 2 hours per week during the school hours, not after school. Ministry of Education grade 5 curriculum was embedded, and it involved play in open spaces, trails, parks, facilities. So what do we know about the 10-year-old? We call them junior joiners. The literature supports the impact recreation can have to a 10-year-old. They're still willing to try. Peer pressure hasn't yet fully kicked in. They're in a full developmental growth, physical, mental health in full explosion. What did we learn? Well, it's no surprise. Youth are spending excessive time in sedentary pursuits. 74% of boys exceed the recommended 2 hours per day of recreational screen time, and 52% of girls. Kids created, as I said, their photographic. So these are the pictures they took of unhealthy. 82% of girls eat 1 sugary candy per day. 65% of boys do. 35% of our boys live in tobacco environments, and 40% of girls live in tobacco environments. Parks, recreation, and culture organizations, primarily public agencies, play a role in facilitating and managing opportunities to be recreationally active, to have access, and to have access to safe spaces, which is critical. The grade 5 active pass was made available to every youth involved in the program. The program included Fitbit challenges, trying to make healthy choices in small bites, health challenges, limit some of the sugary drinks and sugary access that youth have, but we still know that the BMI is 54% of boys are overweight or obese, which is the same as girls. However, we have to be very careful because this is a developmental age. Access Access and inclusion hit the team square in the face. Kids cannot participate when they do not have proper gear, shoes, and jackets. It's hard to kick a ball or walk the trails in rubber boots. 3 sizes too big. And that became very clear for the team that was involved in leading the project. However, we know we're moving in the right direction. This project was a proof of concept, working interdisciplinary. It was a powerful career altering for the VIU students as well. And the intersectoral support is evident in this community, engaging in numerous co-applicants in supporting new funding for this project. We keep moving forward to really probe the systemic issues and root causes in health and well-being in our community. But it is messy work. We have to get right to the grassroots for systemic change. It is complex. Recreation as intervention for health inequities and leisure access and inclusion reflects the emerging shift towards collaborative approaches. It's not just about the individual in recreation, but we know that the impact of the collective is powerful for our communities. Disciplines involved speak different languages. Nursing or health talks determinants of health and population health. Recreation field talks about leisure continuity, reducing barriers and increasing access. Our child and youth care talk a lot about protective factors, emotional and behavioral specialists. But we need each other, and we definitely are stronger together. So that completes the slides of the pictures of the youth telling the story. I just have a few more here that give you a little bit of the framework for the project. You can see here we really look at the ecology of a child, meaning that, of course, you can see there all the different areas where they are connected in the blue list, and then the more pink is the dimensions of that connection and what that means. This was a project to really, as I said, it was research, but it was embedded right within the school system. And the number of parents that we got that signed their child to be involved in research was actually very, very high. We didn't expect that much. So the parents or the role models, the adults in their lives were very keen to see their children involved. These are the areas that we were looking at for themes of what could this tell us? What could the impacts be? So you can see the 5 different themed areas. This is focused on what we call in Canada the National Recreation Framework. And the values are really focused on public good, inclusion and equity, sustainability, and lifelong participation. We know that when a child is exposed to leisure at a young age and it's a positive experience and there's role modeling in there, it can really create that lifelong participation, which really improves their health and well-being in all areas of health and well-being. Obviously, our principles are that we create evidence, and that is a part of what I'm telling you about is what we found in that research, but really looking at partnerships and innovation because it is required to address health and well-being in our communities, not by any one discipline or silo, but by that interdisciplinary and intersectoral approach. These were the partners that were involved. And it was a really excellent working team. It took us a while to figure out how we all talk different language, as I said earlier, but we're after the same game, gain end. So I will stop sharing there and ask if anyone has any questions you would like to ask myself or Richard. Yes.
Do I see anybody?
Zenny.
Zenny? I don't see your
Yes.
hand, sorry.
Thank you, and through you, the chair. This is excellent. a little short story. In the early 90s, I was a single mom of 2 kids on a fairly low income living here in Harewood. My kids went to Bayview School. I'm wondering, I'm passionate about children being in sports. And luckily, I had enough insight to know that I could approach sports organizations, talk to them about not having the finances, and being able to get the assistance I could with my kids. But not everybody of low income families have that knowledge or the fortitude or are too ashamed or for whatever reasons think that their children can't be involved in sports. Number one, even soccer requires soccer shoes. Baseball requires a baseball glove, right? And baseball shoes. And we require more safety equipment than we used to when I was a child. We used to play baseball without a glove. So I'm wondering how we're doing in educating. I imagine the schools are very involved, but how are we doing in being able to entice those parents to recognize that there is a help in the community to have children involved in sports without having to take away from their precious dollars?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I think, and I'll answer, and Richard, if there's anything else you wanted to come behind. But what was critical about this was that it was during the school hours. So while we know there are amazing programs after school, and I'm not speaking down towards after school programs, but for that single parent that may have 2 or 3 other children, to try to get a child to after school with other children that you also have a responsibility for, and the other aspects that may come after school can be a barrier. So access of school time was critical, and that was a critical component for the school district to say, yes, this is very important and it needs to happen during the school hours. The reality is that grade 5 curriculum is really all about what the project was about. So it embedded well. And the parents were very happy to see that the children had access during that time within school. I'd like to also say that it is a much broader picture than just sport too. It's about play, arts, culture, parks and trails. Sports is one component, but it's really opening it up so the child can see a smorgasbord of interest that they might identify with and say, yeah, I'm not into sports, but I really like going for walks in nature, and that can help me to improve my health and well-being. Richard?
That is fabulous. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, it is. And then thank you, Chair Martman. So it's multifaceted, I believe, with this. And as Joanna's mentioned, equipment is one barrier. But as we know, as we see, there's many barriers to the variety of parks, recreation, and cultural types of activities. And how do we reduce those? Through Reimagine, for example, we learned or were reinforced that we need to, rather than trying to entice parents and youth to come to us, we've got to work back and get our facilities and our services to the neighborhoods. So as we move through, we will probably come into council with more programs to say, how do we get out of our facilities and into the neighborhoods? We also, the school board is critical. We need to be working even closer with them. We're working closely with them now on a number of joint ventures, like we've got the sports fields coming up, for example. But it's more on of expanding those kind of programs and services with school board and other agencies like Boys and Girls Club, or BGC as they call themselves now, and how we can continue to reach out to youth throughout the community and find those. We have a very successful program, for example, it's called Health Among Us, and it's been going on for years. And it's great, and then what I'm saying doesn't diminish its greatness, but it's 1 week out of the year, and it's really only for the principals that are savvy enough to register. How do we come back to council? Do we say, how do we get that program to every school, and maybe longer through the year, and working with groups like the different agencies or different departments in VIU to expand that out? We know it's successful. We know it's very popular, and it's a lot about physical literacy, but we can also add in other literacy into there, be it food or cultural or other aspects. So it is coming back to that. We do have a lot of, and this committee was very crucial in updating our LEAP program. But again, LEAP is only, financial barriers is only one barrier, and this committee has been very good in helping us solve that part. But how do we work towards some of those other barriers? Because we have some great parks, we have some great facilities throughout the community, but now we've got to find ways to get people in there that they feel safe, that they feel welcomed, and we provide programs that actually give them that literacy that Joanne was mentioning. I rambled there a bit, so.
Thank you, it's okay. I have Adrian and then Deborah.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Joanne, for your presentation. It's lovely to see you. I don't know if you remember me, but my family came and did the interviews with you. Yeah.
Yes,
So
I do, Adrian.
This program, I mean, my grade 5 has just turned 14, and when he brought home the sign up for this program, I was so excited because I work at Island Health, and I knew about the grants that had been awarded, and I recognized that this was one of the programs. And so he used to call it NAC because everyone went to the Nanaimo Aquatic Center for the weighing and measuring and all the other things that you might have done. But the literacy that it brought to him and also to our daughter who's younger, just through what he learned and what he taught back to our family was amazing. The confidence that it built, I thought, was really, really amazing. And just, you know, it was neat to see in the presentation. You know, I did catch him in one of the pictures, but I also saw, I think, one of the pictures that he took, and to really think through what's healthy and what's unhealthy. And I will say, like, this all happened sort of just before and right sort of at the start of my involvement with this committee. And what I learned through him did help inform, you know, my thoughts and feedback around that LEAP feedback that we did. So I want to thank you. And I wanted to ask, I know that COVID interrupted some of your plans, and I know you were talking about the sports gear and that you were looking at doing a gear drop so that people could share the gear that they're out of, and we did actually start collecting it, and it didn't happen, and I because of COVID, and I might have missed it if it did happen, but just wondering if the city or VIU, if there's any sort of long-term work that has come out of it around that kind of thing, making gear accessible, or even the food. So when we went and did the interview with Joanne, because we were one of the families interviewed, we were presented with a bag of you know, fresh, like largely local food. And I want to thank you for that too as a parent, because, you know, often we get complaints about the healthy foods that we buy, but when we got that bag of food, the kids were really impressed. They said, how did they know all the stuff we buy? And so I earned some points as a parent for that. Thank you. Just it was a real journey for our son and a real journey for our whole family. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for our school, Fairview, being able to be a part of it.
Wonderful. That is so wonderful to hear. And thanks for also identifying that those pictures mean something to you as the children told their story. So let me just answer your question, which was called Shed Your Threads. What we started was actually another grant, which we were successful with the following year in retaining a project called Shed Your Threads, which was to collect as many sporting gear and clothing and equipment that we possibly could. We were 5 days away from that event when COVID hit. And so all of those supplies went to the city, and they found a way to disperse it out into the community. But there's huge potential for that to continue to grow. And the community was very receptive. People were dropping off stuff everywhere. So that was really wonderful to see. And there really is no place in our community to get good, used, free equipment, or else at a very low rate to be able to at least access that one barrier issue. So it was called Shed Your Threads. And yes, the equipment that was collected did go out into the community during COVID. I will also say that this was, we got caught in COVID because we had the proof of concept project, which you just heard about, and then we were in a second year of going back and looking at what what did we learn and what did we miss and what do we need to do to go forward further. Clearly, it is a proof of concept that is positive. We just now need, we need to not go back to a one-year project. It needs to be 3 years at minimum, because you need to catch the child in grade 5, grade 6, grade 7 before they hit high school and start making those more independent choices themselves.
I just wanted to add too that Denny's Deals, he's on 7th and Bruce there. He supplies lots of equipment for kids that don't have any. All of his proceeds, like everything he makes goes towards that. So just a shout out to him because he's really made it possible for a lot of kids to play sports in this community. I now have Deborah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that presentation. Really, really interesting. Just wanted to say before I begin, I am in Vancouver at a conference, and so I'm just jumping in for as long as I can, but I will have to jump off for a meet and greet that's coming up. Just wanted to saddle with Councillor Martman and her, marketing this program to parents and children, and thinking that has there been any thought given to weaving in nonprofits in this way? I know that we see numerous, lots and lots of families, and I just, what Councillor Martman spoke about is really accurate around, getting the information out to those families who may not be, be able to afford sports. And so I think that the local nonprofits could be really instrumental in getting that information out and promoting this. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I have Rachel.
Richard put his hand up. I'm not sure if that was a response.
Did you have something, Mr. Harding, that you wanted to add? You're muted.
Richard.
No, I can do it later. It's just a response to how to include the nonprofits. We can do that maybe afterwards.
Rachel?
So thank you so much for your presentation. I think I missed it. Who was the lead author on the study?
Sorry, who would, you cut out there.
Oh, who was the lead author?
Myself.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and presenting yourself. I was just curious why you guys included BMI as a measure of health when it's more of a statistical measure and not an individualized indicator.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the primary care providers were a critical aspect of the one data component, which was that health measurement. And that was determined by the docs that were involved, is that they felt they really wanted to, you have to decide what are we going to measure in a 1-year period. And they felt that that would help us to look at a longer term approach when we also combined it with the wellness survey, which was really a qualitative subjective response by the students, and then also their participation in the program. So I really would have to go back to the medical or the primary care provider team determine that aspect of the evaluation.
Okay, because weight is different than BMI, so that's why I was curious if you're tracking weight X grade 5, weight X grade 6, weight X grade 7, right? It's different than tracking BMI.
And weight is so critical at that age, right? Because it's such a developmental age that you want to be really mindful of identifying that as a measurement to determine health and well-being.
Oh yeah, I'm not arguing that. I'm just the BMI inclusion there when it's in my, so I'm in university, I have some background in this.
Yeah.
The BMI, for example, was edited. The definition of overweight was changed in 1998. So this thing is very subjective. So that's why I was asking after that there. It's maybe not necessary. And also cash shame. Health providers are very fat phobic. So, they can be implicitly biased against the children they're weighing if the kids are larger. So I was just kind of wondering why that was included when weight's just a very, this is what it is sort of measure, right?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so thank you very much for answering our questions as well.
Mr. Harding, I'll go to you to expand on the nonprofits.
Thank you, because Deborah, that's for us to get this, to make a real dent in the community, we have to include the nonprofits, because there's what is evident is just whatever your group and organization you do reach out to, they all have a youth focus or they have a health focus in so many ways, but we're not necessarily sharing all that information or finding ways to utilize all the resources that we have, and I think that's actually a barrier for delivery over time. So what we were hoping to do with Joanne's the next phase is how do we expand this, and how do we include more, and then how do we also come out of some of the things we found and reimagine again, and start coming and changing some of our services so that we work with the nonprofits in other ways and get out there. I meant to mention the BCG as one group, but there's many others that can help us.
Thank you. Not seeing any more questions. Thank you very much, Joanne. This was very good. Second time I've seen it, and each time I learned more. So thank you very much, and I wish you continued success with this program.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now go to the design commercial update to be introduced by Mr. Sims, General Manager, Engineering and Public Works.
And that is just on pages 21 to 31 on the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just noticed Mr. Harding raised his hand. He may want to add to the discussion.
Where is he?
No, I just, sorry. I'm probably dragging it on, Chair. I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
So this committee, we will be back to this committee because we're just wetting your whistle a little bit with this, because I think Joanne and I will be back, and because we believe we need to come back, particularly it's because really a lot of these issues is accessibility and inclusiveness and ways to do it. So we're going to be coming back to you with some of the programs and expansions of what we want to do. So this won't be the last you'll see of this.
That's great, thank you, because we do need to see and hear more of it, see what we can do to help move it forward. Thank you.
Thanks,
Mr.
Mr.
Sims?
Harding, General Manager of Promotions and Recreation and Culture. Thanks to the Chair and to the committee for the opportunity to be here once again. Can you please give me a thumbs up if the sound is okay? Okay, great. So the committee first saw this project of design commercial in November of last year, and it's been a fairly extensive public engagement process. And really today we're presenting sort of the results in a concept form. James Knight, our capital project manager, is going to present the results that we've sort of pulled together from all of the public engagement for design commercial. And I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but really this is an opportunity. Council's really prioritized reinvigorating downtown, and this is an opportunity to get the look and feel to be attractive to pedestrians and all forms of mobility. And I hope your earlier presentation was intriguing, and this, we're pleased to present the concepts as they exist before they go to public or to the council. And I would say that if the committee has any comments or thoughts, we would be pleased to hear it as we sort of wrap up the project and consider the final concept. So without any further ado, I'll pass it over to Mr. Knight.
And Mr. Knight, can you please advise if you'd like questions during your presentation or after?
I think after would be best. I do apologize for the lighting. I don't know why it keeps dimming and going bright again, but anyway, I don't have much control over that. But thank you, Bill, for the introduction, and thank you to the committee for having me to discuss the project and to provide you with some updates. I'm very excited about the project, so yeah, I'm hoping that you share that excitement. Is the screen sharing?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. My computer seems a bit slow.
Now. There you go.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'm just going to start by giving you some very brief background information about the project, and then I'm going to get into a bit of the conceptual design as it stands now, and speak specifically to how it relates to accessibility and inclusiveness. And yeah, so the project objectives from the beginning have really been to establish an action plan to refresh the public space on commercial and to enhance opportunities for community events, retailers, and public art. And the project project extents go from Tideline Park along Commercial to Dallas Square Park, the home of the Cenotaph, and also include Skinner Street and Bastion Street from Skinner to Front, Wharf Street, and the front area of Diana Krall Plaza where it interfaces with Commercial. And I've broken, or as I should say, I've condensed the project schedule here into 5 key phases. So the discovery phase and the design phase. And like Bill said, this involved a really robust stakeholder engagement schedule. So we had site tours, meetings, open houses, a couple of brief surveys and presentations, including Ian Lockwood from Tool Design's presentation to the ACAI committee on November 24th of last year. And the discovery phase, the key goals were to really to collaborate with the community and our stakeholders to identify project values and ideas for how to get those values through into an actual design. And then the design phase built on previous work during the discovery phase, and it also relied heavily on stakeholder participation. And it established a set of design principles which were being used to evolve the concept, to evolve into the concept plan. And we're now in the concept review phase. So we're gathering feedback on the conceptual design. We had a public feedback survey, which just concluded on April 14th. And of course, this meeting, I'm hoping, is a big part of the conceptual review. And then over the next few months, we'll receive and review draft plans. And then the final plan is expected mid-July. And these are the 4 design principles that were identified by Tool Design. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, yeah, Tool Design are our partners. They're the successful bidders for the job, and they partnered with Mobicon. And so the design principles that they're working with, and these are directly represent what we heard during the engagement session. So they represent the desires of the community. Enhanced streetscapes, commercial offerings and livability, temporary street activation, and public green space. Now, one of the questions in the survey, it gave a number of different elements and asked the respondents to rank their top 5 most desired elements for commercial. And these were the top 5 according to the respondents in order: flexible space for community events, seating, dining areas and rest areas, greenery, enhanced pedestrian environment, and lighting for pedestrian comfort and safety. And if I go back to the design principles, I really feel that the feedback we've received so far shows that Tool did a great job of taking these principles and incorporating them into the design, because there's good correlation between the principles and what people ranked. And then this pie chart shows responses to questions that directly asked whether or not the concepts improved accessibility for people with visual or physical impairments. And according to the respondents, sorry about that. According to the respondents, we have about a 73% response saying that people either strongly agree or somewhat agree, and about an 8% disagreement with that statement. So Tool Design right now is in the process of reviewing the survey results and compiling them. So these are just sort of some preliminary, as a preliminary look at what we heard back. And a couple of quotes from the survey feedback. Any enhancements to the downtown area has my approval. Making it safer and more accessibility for people is a priority. And someone else said, I think it's wonderful to paint rainbow crosswalk intersection for inclusivity. It's fantastic and forward thinking. Now getting into the actual conceptual design and again, how it relates to accessibility and inclusiveness. The first thing about this cross section for Commercial Street is that is that they're proposing a flush street, meaning that there's no barrier. So, I mean, you can wheel right across the street. There's no barrier curb in the way, which creates more of a plaza feel rather than, you know, separating the pedestrian area from the road area with the barrier curb. And some of the specific design elements we show here, wider sidewalks with a smooth finish for easy rolling. And then here we have a textured edge, which has been recommended to have a contrasting color and texture to the sidewalk. And the purpose of that is to allow people with vision impairments to be able to distinguish between an area that's safe, which is the sidewalk, and an area where hazards may exist.
Love it.
Thanks. Barrier free, I already mentioned that. This is a flexible use zone in here. So this area most of the time would be used for parking, but it has that flexibility. Because there's no barrier, it can be used also for a restaurant patio or something like this. So what I kind of envision is some movable planters or something that could be put out here, and then this becomes more of an area for people without cars. And one thing the tool suggested was, you know, during the daytime or during the morning, this area could be used for deliveries and whatnot, and then in the afternoon you could use it as a patio. And then, of course, if you're closing down the street for special events, then for example, the night market or a food truck festival or something like that, then you have a plaza instead of a road and a sidewalk. And then the road area has been narrowed a little bit, and the tool is suggesting a textured surface to slow down traffic a bit more. And then the final element on this graphic is structural soil cells. So we have a real problem right now, I'm sure everyone has noticed, particularly downtown with street trees. The roots get too big and then the sidewalk heaves and it creates an uneven surface, a tripping hazard and a danger to pedestrian and people with mobility issues. So structural soil cells provide a much larger growing medium so that the tree roots have room to grow and they don't have to heave up the sidewalk. So it does create a safer environment. I threw this slide in. This was a part of Ian Lockwood's presentation at the November 24th meeting, and it shows some universal accessibility design principles. And when I looked back on this slide, I saw that their concept includes a lot of the elements that are shown here. So again, they were true to what they were planning and incorporating accessibility into their design. So here is, a photograph of a tree that's on the corner of Church and Commercial, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, the tree roots heaving and creating a real problem for mobility and creating a hazard, and we're hoping to do away with that. This is Museum Way, and I mean, there's examples of flush streets in other cities in Canada and across the world that I could have included, but I thought this is a great example because this is in Nanaimo. We have a flush street already. So this is not exactly what we're planning for Commercial, but this is the idea. So you have no curb, you have straight access right across. Barrier-free access is what I've called it here. And this is on Front Street where we have a raised intersection, which provides a flush crosswalk, and there's also detectable warning strips. And it's similar to what's planned for Commercial, except it won't be just a raised crosswalk. The entire road will be raised, but we'll be including warning strips, which aren't shown on the plans, but they'll be included. And also, I do remember from the previous meeting in November that it was mentioned that there was a desire to have benches fairly evenly spaced. And that's not shown on the design yet, but that is something. I mean, we haven't included the details. Right now we're working on the concepts, but that is not something that's been forgotten. And this is the preliminary design for the rainbow intersection. So rather than just having the crosswalks painted in the rainbow pattern, we're looking at doing the entire intersection. And I love this design personally. And I see these, sorry, this is my personal thoughts. I see these as being colored concrete strips so that they're not painted over top of over the material, which means they would wear a lot better. They wouldn't have to be repainted as they wear down. The color is integral with the concrete, so it would remain.
That would also like help stop vandalism, right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I you know what, I don't think I know the full answer to that question, but I imagine, yeah, that it could be ground off or removed more easily.
I don't think it would stop vandalism, Richard, it'd just be easier to remove.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It actually might
Yeah,
increase
easier to remove it.
vandalism because it's more in some people's faces, so they might not like it, those bigots.
I just have a visual question. What other alterations to that intersection was there going to be done then?
At commercial and Bastion?
Yeah, the rainbow crosswalk area.
Well, all of Commercial Street is proposed to be raised and curb free, so that intersection would be a part of that design. And then the rainbow intersection would just be something unique to that intersection as compared to other intersections.
But nothing else like rainbow, like with like the poles or anything like that either. Just specifically the crosswalk.
We haven't really got into that level of detail, but I love that idea. I think it's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, it was something that I was kind of thinking of, like why not make the poles themselves or like integrate any of the surrounding area to be more connected. So like looking at it like a overall painting that's somehow connecting each little bit a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's exactly the kind of feedback we're listening to.
I'm going to open it up to other people if you have questions. Could you please use your hands or raise them? Okay, I'm not seeing any right now, but I do have one. Especially when you were showing the museum way there, the bricks and everything. You don't know how many times some of us that wear high heels have got our heels cut in those bricks. And wrecked shoes and stuff, twisted ankles, so I'm glad to see you're looking at that. And then my other question is when we heard from the safety and security audit for the downtown, a lot of their concepts are in direct contrast to what the concepts are in this, so how are you going to balance that?
Tool has met with that team, and I was unfortunately not a part of that conversation, so I'm waiting to hear back what they have to report about what came out of that meeting.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be around tree placement, lighting, because lighting actually is a SecTech principle as well as the tree placement and benches. Those were the three that I heard, so. Okay, thank you. My battery's going to die here, so I'm looking around.
Annie, I have my hand up.
Okay, Zanny.
Through you, I'm just wondering, with the textured road surface, and I often wonder when I'm walking down the one that we have by the conference center, does that impede or is that a barrier for somebody with mobility issues if they're wanting to cross the street?
That's a great question. Through the chair, sorry, my apologies for not following protocol earlier. Textures and surface finishes are something we're just looking at now. So I'd be very interested to hear comments back about that from this group. So Tool Design did suggest that they liked a textured road because they felt that it would slow traffic down. However, that question was raised. So when the road becomes a plaza feel, if it's shut down, is that textured feel actually going to hinder mobility? So yeah, I mean, I don't think we'd do something that was overly textured.
Just to answer that, I know Linda Dirksen, who used to be part of our committee and unfortunately had to step down.
James is still speaking.
James, you're on mute, James. I thought he was done.
How much of the time was I muted?
About the last 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, so what I was saying was another suggestion was using larger pavers so that there was fewer spots where there would be joints. And also, the other suggestion was putting a concrete base under pavers, and that would cause less variability at the joints. It would create a much smoother finish.
And I was just adding that Linda Dirksen, who used to be part of our committee, who is a wheelchair user, they really struggle with the change in structure. And she did speak with the designers, I believe, as well. And that she spoke to us about it when you were here before, or not you were here, but when they were here before, about the issues with the change in that for those in wheelchairs and mobility.
And I think we should be really conscious of this, because I would hate to have one thing that undid all the great other work we do and have one little thing we overlooked. Well, it's not a little thing, but have something we overlooked that we could have made better.
Okay, I see Richard.
So for the textured surface, were you thinking of something similar, like when you go down the Malahat, there's those like textured edges that kind of like bump the car to wake you up if you're falling asleep at the wheel?
Through the chair. So are you talking about the furnishing zone between the sidewalk and the flex zone?
Yeah, an actual like the textured surface that would theoretically lower the speed.
Oh, so on the roadway. Like I said, those decisions haven't been made, but I think the things we're looking at are either paving stones or stamped concrete. So on Museum Way, that's a stamped concrete sort of look, and then the paving stones would be kind of what's on commercial now. So the interlocking bricks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, we do get lots of complaints, and we've had lawsuits over those interlocking breaks with people tripping on them because they become uneven. So, and I know that we've heard from people with sight impairment, and Richard, that you were one of them, that discussed the concerns with that. So I think that's something we really need to be careful with, because most people want a flat surface, especially if you use a walker or a wheelchair.
Yeah, very much so. It does make it a little bit harder when it's too textured, like the cobblestone type effect is kind of like the worst effect for walkers especially, and to my knowledge, wheelchairs. So if we can avoid that and more of a even surface, like the stamping, I think that would be more ideal. One thing that I want to address was actually lighting. One thing that I've heard from feedback is that there's a lot of like alcoves and like little spots that are like darker that kind of make people feel nervous late at night. How is lighting kind of being more addressed, or is there just going to be a general increase of lighting in that downtown area?
Through the chair, we haven't got to that level of detail yet, but as I showed in the slide, lighting is one of the priorities that were identified through the public consultation, and it fell also into one of the categories that were part of the design principle. So we'll definitely take a look at the lighting, but we haven't got there yet.
Cool. Okay.
Just to add to that, Richard, too, that was identified in the safety and security audit. And so we call it's called SEPTED principles, which is crime prevention through environmental design will be looked at for all of those areas. So we're going to have to balance some of that stuff off with public safety as well. So just so you know, that will be looked at from a public safety lens as well as accessibility lens. I now have Rachel, I believe. Yes.
Hi, another voice on the should we have a textured road. Well, I really like the idea of slowing down vehicles in the downtown area because people drive way too fast. I'm both a driver and a pedestrian. I'm a very slow pedestrian because I'm disabled. Okay, and people like to just vroom past me and like almost mow me down on crosswalks and stuff. So I'm a huge fan of slowing cars down in areas where there's lots of pedestrians and shops. But also, it's hard to take a walker on cobblestones, as Richard said, and a lot of wheelchair users don't have a ton of padding, especially if they're in a manual chair. And my grandma, for example, has osteoporosis. It's so painful for her to go over the little tiny cracks even in like normal sidewalks. So she can't go places that have anything less than perfectly smooth asphalt basically in her wheelchair. So I'm kind of hoping that the city decides to go with a smooth road surface because this is like a downtown area where people are going to want to be going because it's more accessible than anywhere else in Nanaimo. It's just my thought there.
Thank you. Councillor Markman?
Adrian as well.
I'm going in order for him.
Adrian's before me.
Okay, Adrian, I had you before her. I had her after you. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I wanted to speak to the textured road as well, just to say that I don't know what would be best from a personal point of view. I do remember Jocelyn having a lot of suggestions during the playground assessment that I just, stood there and thought, it was so early on in our meetings and just thought, I would never have thought of that. I would never have thought of that. I would never have thought of that. So I'm so grateful to Rachel and Richard and everyone who's spoken about this. And just, I don't know if I've already spoken with Jocelyn, but yeah, that was my first thought was, I wonder what she would say, and Linda as well. But, and then just on the public safety and accessibility topic, and Richard had spoken about the lighting. And I'm also curious to know, our whole family is so excited about the night market and excited about summer events. And with that and with us comes my brother-in-law who uses a scooter. And I know for, every city parade that our children have ever been in or our family's been involved with, there's always the, park around the corner on Wallace before the vault so that you can get out easily and get the scooter out and then be somewhere where it's accessible to be, because there's not a crowded sidewalk and there's not, a gap and thinking of all those things. And another thing is washrooms. And I'm just curious to know if, I know that is a public safety and an accessibility topic, and just curious to know if there is thought of adding any more washrooms downtown that are accessible and available. Even, recently, I know various businesses have said, we've started locking our doors because people always want to come in and use our bathroom. And if you flip that on another side, how privileged, many of us are that we can use a bathroom whenever we want. And some people can't because they don't, they may not have access to indoor space that has a bathroom, and some people may not be able to access the bathroom that is available. And I like to stop myself sometimes and think about that from an equity lens and it's so exciting that more and more people are going to be able to come down and congregate in our core. And that's always a big part of it too. Linda always said everybody poops. So
I'm just going to ask Mr. Sims to answer that question for you about the public washrooms, if there will be more added, if he's aware.
Thanks, Chair. I think part of this project certainly did look at that and acknowledge that there could be some improvement, certainly at the existing situation in Diana Krall Plaza. There's a concept to expand those. The other thing we're still sort of keeping back from everyone at this point until we get some more details put together is the work around the old Gene Burns site and the transit exchange and all that sort of stuff. So that all comes into it. So accessible washrooms in that location somewhere is very much on our radar. And I think we always have to balance that with the challenge of how they get managed. And so I don't know if Mr. Harding's still with us, but if he's got any further thoughts, because he's got quite a bit of experience.
Mr. Harding, are you still there?
I was, but to be honest, when Mr. Sims starts talking, I don't usually listen. So you have to, because it's engineering stuff. So it's, so you have to say what that is actually about.
But you're the expert in
about the
accessible
washrooms.
Oh. So are we talking about the Portland Loo, or are we talking about?
What we're looking at is in the plan for Commercial Street, would we be looking at adding washrooms? Like right now we have the Universal one, which was like 180,000 bill back in, oh my God,
15 years ago.
15, 20 years ago, exactly. Are we gonna look at adding more to that area? Like right now, a lot of them are closed because they're public safety issues.
Yeah, my question was around, as we're doing these changes, there's the need for accessible washrooms in general, and just the understanding that as more people are coming down to the core, and we're wanting it to be that kind of a space, and we're wanting to have it be inclusive, and including all people, some of whom may face stigma when they go to ask to use a washroom, and some may not be able to access the washroom that's there.
The short answer to that, Adriana, it would be on special events, we'll make sure we have accessible portables that are brought in for the special events. Our next big priority is we've got to redo the washroom at Maffeo at some point. And it's going to be in the millions to do it, because we're actually just doing a washroom audit, an accessible washroom audit. And my next presentation is actually going to be about phase 2 Westwood accessible washrooms. And the cost is just amazing. As soon as we tell the public and sometimes council how much washrooms cost, they say, no way are we going to spend $1 million on a toilet. But we have to make these things bulletproof, because even the Portland Loo is shut down, unfortunately, on a regular basis. And it's hard to vandalize it, but they find a good way to do it. So we've just got to find ways to, when we build these things, to make them accessible, but also that they just don't get thrashed. For example, right now there's some TikTok challenge going on that you can video yourselves by smashing up public toilets. And so that's why we had to shut down Harewood Activity Center, and we also had to make more restrictions to our washrooms at the Stadium District, because they absolutely smashed every little bit and threw them out on the fields. And so those are washrooms that we've tried to make pretty accessible. Sorry, that's kind of a downer part of it, but I'm just saying it's we wanted, so in the special events we try to bring them facilities in and then get them out of there. But the goal is to find some more, but we don't have plans to put more fixed ones in the downtown at this time. But hopefully, if things take off and it becomes more and more popular, then those kind of things we'll have to put more in.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just to give you a rough estimate, Vancouver just voted to put one in at $650,000 just for a basic toilet. So they're very expensive, and when you put it into perspective, like for us, a 1% tax increase is anything that's over 1 million, like $1.1 million, I think is what a 1% tax increase is now. So
there is a concept to put some additional space in the Diana Krall Plaza, and so that's, as I said earlier, it's definitely on our radar.
Even knowing that that accessible temporary washrooms are available, and that you want to do them is good. I'm just thinking, from a family perspective, like a family member wanting to scoot down, take in an event, scoot back, needing to go to the washroom. For me, if I desperately had to go and I couldn't make it to one of the public sites, I'd maybe buy a coffee, go in somewhere and use the washroom. But if you can't access it, then you can't do that. And if there's stigma toward you, then you can't do that. And to flip it from business perspective, I know every business that has a washroom in there probably gets multiple asks. Every time there's an event too, and then it's not sustainable for them.
Yeah, so I know whether we can rent the accessible toilets. We've put them in some of our playgrounds now, the accessible ones, which also help parents go in with children. And then, so it's not just if you have an accessibility issue, but also if you have, you need assistance and things like that. So we do that, but we need more. And Maffeo is going to be one we come to council with soon. But actually, my next presentation will be the next one we're coming with. That'll be Westwood. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I won't take up too much time, and we could have more porta potties if they didn't keep burning them down. But on the commercial street and the pavement of it, and just from the concept of it going building to building without the sidewalks, etc., and you see this kind of in a European plaza kind of style, I'm thinking that although I understand the textured tile may slow the traffic down, I'm thinking the way it's going to be designed and the way there's going to be people, and you see it in Europe, that the cars may automatically be slower than they are on just a regular straight street, the way it is right now. So I think being able to make it as smooth as possible is going to be necessary in order to really be accessible. Just my 2 cents. The other thing I recognize is that there are options here, and they are looking for somebody if the advisory committee is satisfied with the presentation.
Jenny, if I could stop you, we've already discussed that here. Ms. Robertson's going to speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
I was just talking to Mr. Sims, and this presentation is also going to continue to be shared with some other groups as well. So there'll be a collection of all the feedback. So we'll have some detailed minutes on this with some of the suggestions and preferences as suggested by the committee, and that will be shared with them as well as with Mr. Knight. So we were looking to perhaps change the recommendation on the floor just a little bit, which would be that the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness support in principle the project concepts as outlined in the April 27th, 22 report by James Knight, Capital Project Management Specialist. And then there'll also be the accompanying minutes, and then that will all get collected and then shared as a final report to Council in June or July.
And I would like to add option 2, which I believe is more applicable, that the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness support in principle the project concept as outlined in the April 27, 2022 report by James Knight, Capital Project Management Specialist, with the following suggestions for consideration. And based on what we've heard in the past from Jocelyn and from Linda and what we've heard at this table, that consideration be given to smooth road surfaces, not textured. Because we've heard that throughout all of our meetings when we've talked to those with accessibility issues, that a smooth surface is much preferred. And I really don't believe there's any research to show you that a textured surface is going to slow cars down. Like, I mean, I've traveled Europe, I've traveled the States, and I've been on all those roads, and especially if you go to Italy, they're just flying. It's irrelevant. It really is to most people. You're going to have a few that will do, but the majority of people don't. But that's just my viewpoint. But I think it's really important that we capture, like Zenny said at the same, that we need to look at smooth surfaces if we want it to be truly inclusive.
Function over fashion.
Yeah. Any other thing that you guys would like to put in for consideration that we've heard? Washrooms, accessible washroom consideration? I'm looking to you, Adrian, since you brought it up. Do you think that would be something you'd like to include?
I'd like to. I would like to know that. I mean, and I'm aware of the cost, and I also know that there's a, how should I put it? There's a social cost. There's a human cost to not, so balancing, like having availability even during events and looking to expand. I'm not saying one in every corner or anything like that, but just knowing that that there's going to be access for people.
What about if we said accessible washrooms, especially during events? Isn't that what allow us to bring one in? Would that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
Thank you.
one other thing I was thinking about, and this goes to you, Mr. Harlow, when we talk about the trees before, you brought up that really good point that yes, I can use my cane, but I can't put it up high. So if we're looking at trees that encompass that the blind can't always see visually impaired, can't always see above their heads.
Mm-hmm. So like making sure that like branches and that aren't sticking out anywhere like up below like
7 feet.
6, something like that.
Yeah, like you're 6'2", so like 7 feet minimum.
Yeah, 7 feet minimum easily.
I think the city's incorporated that a lot, and like Mr. Harding can talk about that in maintenance. But it might be nice if consideration is given to those types of trees for future reference. Anything else the committee wants to see? I'm looking. Oh, I see Rachel. Then Richard. I can't hear you, Rachel. You're all garbled right now.
Is it working now?
Now it's good.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
I entered this as a discussion for after the commercial street design, but it's about the commercial street design. So I was hoping the committee could discuss the point 2 about the commercial aspects and livability. There was point 2 at the beginning. They had like 4 points, sorry. But it's about us accessing businesses once we're in the commercial area. area. None of them have. Oh, sorry. Can someone turn their microphone off?
You're breaking again.
About accessing the businesses along the commercial street area, with the non-wheelchair accessible entrances. I was wondering if we could put a item in the redesign, like asking businesses, hey, since we're making this more accessible, do you want to consider making accessible doors?
So could we put that consideration be given, that we ask for consideration if a business is renovating or doing any exterior work, that consideration be given to retrofitting for accessibility, something like that? I'm looking to Mr. Corson.
Yeah, so Chair, I think when we're redoing the project, we'll be looking at each entrance. We can work with the property owners to see if there's a chance to raise the street or sidewalk in those locations.
Okay, so how about the city will work with, we'll try to work with property owners to build their entrances to accessible levels? How about that consideration?
We can also work with the Business Improvement Association.
Not entirely, no.
So we'll put consideration will be consideration will be given to the city to work with business owners to look at possibly improving accessibility.
I'm too fast, but.
Oh, sorry. To improve the access for accessibility. Bill will give it to you.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. It's capturing that we want to have the entranceways more accessible for those in wheelchairs, walkers. Trip hazards. Bill, can you help out with that? Does that work for you, Rachel?
Yeah, that's half of it. The other half is actually opening the door to businesses. While we're doing all this work to make these businesses accessible, it doesn't really help if I can't get in the door by myself. So I was wondering if we could ask the businesses if they'd be willing to install like a button or automatic doors or something. I don't know if that's possible.
What we can do is that we can encourage businesses, I think that's the better term, to encourage businesses to make their business more accessible. Because we can't tell private owners what to do right now. What we can do if there is a new build, that's when that can come into play. But for retrofits, maybe, but we can't force businesses to be accessible, but we certainly can encourage them through the Downtown Business Improvement Association or through Mr. Corson's office or even Public Works office. Would that work for you? Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Harlan. And then Deborah and then Lynn.
I think with the whole bathroom issue, it kind of serves a rather, obvious purpose, because every Friday and Saturday night downtown, it's not necessarily going to stop people from taking a bathroom break in the street or in an alcove. So I think, if you think about the cost effectiveness of it all, it's stopping people having to clean up feces and doorsteps and stuff like that late at night. Plus, it would definitely allow for more events to be kind of held downtown and actually not put that onus on businesses too at the same time.
Yeah, I appreciate that issue that we've had though, is that needles get thrown in them and then they clog everything up. We've had assaults occur in them, which then people come after us because they're not safe. So that is something that I can honestly tell you that the city is really seriously looking at between Public Works and Mr. Harding's group.
Okay.
Ms. Hollins?
Yeah, real quick, and then I'm going to have to go, unfortunately. I'm just thinking that there used to be a process to be certified as a business that was safe, or a business that, was, valued equality and diversity. And I'm wondering if there's something that we can resurrect there, just in follow-up to Rachel's point, where we could offer businesses, a sticker or something that says they're an accessible business if they're able to meet some criteria. Might be an interesting conversation to have with Kim Smythe.
I did follow up with that previously. It was called Safe Harbor, and it was run by Terry Flower. It was an amazing program. But once the funding left for those programs, it's all gone. So I agree with you. It's something maybe that we can look at through the chamber or the BIA. I think that would be a great referral place. So I will follow up with that, or actually myself or Council Martin will follow up with that. Thank you. I'm looking now. Lynn, Ms. Work?
Hi. Through the chair, just a quick comment on the accessibility to the businesses, because I've sat on another accessibility committee at a previous job. And what we found is if you're going to make the doorways accessible so people can get into the businesses, that's great. But often the businesses themselves inside are not accessible. So paying some sort of attention to that kind of piggybacks on the last comment around some sort of program or something to encourage businesses to become fully accessible. And I like the sticker idea, and I think I've mentioned this one before, that the accessibility committee I was involved with before gave balloon bouquets out during accessibility week every year to businesses that had made changes to make themselves accessible, or to the parks department for making a park accessible, or whatever. So it's just an idea that I wanted to float out there.
Thank you very much. The recommendations will be caught and they'll be emailed out in our minutes, so, because I know Ms. Robertson's going to work with Mr. Corson just to firm up the one here.
I emailed her.
Oh, you emailed her
Okay,
already?
yeah, and I might maybe just recapture the ones that you did mention, and maybe one of them captures it, but if not, I'll include your comments, which is, so it would be option 2, and then the following suggestions for consideration would be smooth road surfaces, accessible washrooms, especially during events, ensure branches do not hang below 7 feet minimum, and encourage businesses to make their businesses more fully accessible. And then,
Does that work for everybody? I'm seeing no negative things, so thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. I guess we don't need to work on it any further.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so we'll be moving on to our next one, which is the, before we do that, I would like to thank Mr. Knight for your presentation. I forgot to do that. I'm sorry about that. Very informative, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go to assessing downtown business discussion. Is that fine, Rachel, with what we've already done, or is there more that you would like to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that. That's a great point. We'll go to D now, which is public engagement summary and phase concept plan for Westwood Lake. Mr. Harding. My iPad's at 4%.
Hello again. I know with this you have a big agenda today, so I will try not to be too long on this one. I just want to give the committee an update on this project, and also we're going to be coming back to you probably later this summer, early fall, with talking about phase 2. But so council now has approved phase 1 of this, and this committee was very instrumental in parts of it. I should say, first of all, Kirsty McDonald would be doing this presentation and doing much better, but she just had a baby girl on Saturday, so you're stuck with me doing this presentation. But I do have Mike Elliott also online, the project manager, and also Deb Beck, who is filling in for Kirsty, that can fill in any things I've missed. But again, just want to give you a quick update on where we've been, including, of course, the input from the committee. So council, now let's see if I can do this now. Whoop, there we go. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so background, I just gave you a little bit of a background. We're going to talk a little bit about the engagement update of what we did, final concept plans for phase 1, and then the next phases for phase 2. Everyone knows the location we're talking about, but just in case you don't, we're really just talking about the main entrance to the first beach at Westwood Lake, in which we've been trying to just focus in on improvements there. I know today's presentation is really a lot about parking, but the real goal of this update, is to make the beach bigger, make it more accessible, look at our future accessible building, accessible parking, really just to upgrade this park that really hasn't had a lot of attention since the 60s, to be honest. And so this is much due, past due to get us some things done here. Just the general location, as you all know, again, the first beach, the waterfront on the first beach area, parking access, trail access is what we're really looking at. last summer, and including with the coming to the committee and getting input. I got to move you guys off a bit here because I can't see it. We did took a lot of the broader input, what people are looking for parks in our phase 1 reimagine, but then also we did some specific engagement just for this area, which includes some door-to-door flyers to all the residents, on-site signage, so all the summer users last year could see in a few locations where we had the signage up with QR codes. They could do an online survey. Staff also did some pop-up information sessions, and then of course we did a review with ASA. We also did a quick update with the environmental committee last month, and then a number of stakeholder interviews, both through the reimagine process, but then also through a process for this. What we did there, as we did with the committee, is we kind of came up with 2 general concepts of which people could take elements of each that they like. And so based on all the information and the different elements, we've come up with a final concept, which is attached here, and it's also attached to your agenda. So, looking at the existing accessible float to do some upgrades to that, future special event and area green space, existing vendor areas and power. I don't need to read through it all, but it's on here, all the number of things that we're trying to upgrade and enhance. And then in particularly, and what doesn't show here is that beach access, to make it just much more accessible, a little bit bigger as it's becoming more popular, better trails, better access to water, both for able-bodied and those who need extra assistance. And so what we've got with council right now and approval is to go ahead with phase 1, which is the one it's the main parking area. With this kind of park, we just can't shut it down for 8 months and do it all. It's just impossible. So we're doing it in the 2 phases. We think the least impact to the public is to do this phase here, which is all the parking and the disabled stalls or accessible stalls, as well as some of the plantings and other improvements. And then next year, come in and do ideally the accessible washroom, the beachfront, and the trail work. See if I missed anything here. Just some renderings of what it should look like when we're all done.
Can I ask a question here?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, on this slide and the next slide that you have, again, I'm looking at, especially the next slide, is that it's not going to be a smooth surface. And so I've got concerns about that.
Yeah,
So
Mr. Elliott, we haven't actually picked the actual surface yet. It's going to probably be subject a little bit to how we do with the tendering. And Mr. Elliott can talk a little bit about that. We're trying to find some pervious, because one of the things, again, is when you put up a parking lot, everyone says, it's not really exciting. But we have to find some ways that is environmentally sensitive. So we're looking at some pervious stall pavers, but also there would be some paved area. These are just concepts. Mike, have you come up with the final surface?
The only textured surface would be in the parking stalls, not the mobility stalls, but the ones at the back there where you're looking. Everything else will be asphalt and a brushed concrete. So,
did that answer your question, Zenny? Zenny?
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah. So one of the main issues, of course, that people don't want to take out vegetation. So we've adjusted a lot to save more vegetation. That, of course, reduce the amount of stalls, but we will get 36 additional standard stalls. But a lot of it is focused on upgrading, making it more accessible, pedestrian safety. And then again, get ready to do some of the bigger work, which is that beachfront accessible washroom, accessible trails. So 4 additional accessible stalls for a total of 8 universal accessible stalls. And I think Kirsty and Mike both told me to thank you guys because you came up with some different standards of which we could use. So these will be quite large stalls that you can, as you see here, you can do rear and side loading requests. So I'm not sure, Mike, do you want to add anything to this part?
Yeah, just I don't know if it was innovative, but we thought we wouldn't separate them. We would just make them work for both options in every stall. So.
Okay. And you'll see off in the corner here is the potential of the future washroom block. And so let's see. So we have the current feature is 36 trees are impacted, only one significant tree. The previous plan had 46 to 50 trees with 4 significant trees removed. And then, so this design saves as much vegetation as we can, as well as giving us some definitely improved access and parking and mobility to the whole area. Also include landscape buffer between the neighbors. There'll be some of that done in phase 1 and completion in phase 2. Next phase, as we mentioned, and this will be coming back, we'll be doing some work over the next couple of months, and then coming back again, particularly with the accessible washroom for committee impact or input and thoughts. Some of those include, overall natural aesthetic, central green area, improved multi-use trails, connections to parks, integration into single track and multi-trail systems, new activity mobile routes on Westwood Road, underground servicing for future building and conduit. We aren't putting lights in here. This kind of to support the fact that this is a daytime park, not a nighttime park. Also helps with the dark skies objectives that we're also trying to do. But also, so if you don't see light standards and such, it's because we want this to be a daytime park. Once we start putting lights in, it does add other issues to managing a park of this nature. Final counts also include, although we may do some this year, Miss Davis is on. She's got 2 new accessible ramps that we have now that we're looking to add into Departure Bay for sure, but possibly if we need to do one here, we'll do it here, although we think we can make the other one work better once we do next year's work. But we have another one that we could put either at Finn Beach or some other areas which we may look for some input from the committee on. And the goal is, let's see if I get the final one here. The one we'll be coming back to is the next one is the washroom, because what we build here will be there for 50, 60 or more years. So we want to get it right. So we'll be coming back with options and ideas for this new washroom building. The main goal of this one is 100% accessible and inclusive. That'll be our first objective, and then there'll be a bunch of other objectives of what we could utilize with the building. We'll have some storage for some special equipment, how we do to support some of the life-saving lifeguarding we do at this area. But we'll come back with that, as including really talking about a playground that won't be on this site, further down, some things like that we want to include in the next year or so. So those are the steps. We're going through some of the final detail designs now, bringing this to you right now to show you what we're doing. We hope to tender out later this summer with phase 1. Again, with this park, it's tough to do it. It's busy all year round, so there's really not a perfect time, but we feel that late summer, early fall will be the best time to do this work, and that might be the same next year when we do the beach and the other works. And that's it. Again, it was just a quick update to the committee on this project, that it is coming along, and if there's any questions or comments, please to answer.
If you can stop sharing your screen, then I can see everybody. Thank you. Who do I see? Rachel.
Oh, that was a clap emoji. I'm thrilled about the multiple disability parking spots. Like, absolutely beyond thrilled. 8! I could cry. I'm so happy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Well, that was input we got from the committee, so we appreciate it.
Sarah?
Thank you. Can you hear me? I haven't spoken much yet so far.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I just wanted to ask for more details around the washroom. You used the word universal. So what I was wondering is if that's inclusive washrooms that are multi-stall with floor-to-ceiling doors for all genders, or if they're gender-specific and segregated for men and women, and if there's a separate single stall, and whether or not that's a family or for all abilities, universal access. accessible washroom? I'm just looking for more info on that.
Well, that's perfect question, Sarah, and exactly why we're going to come back to the committee here when we start designing it to get that kind of input. So we haven't done that, but that's what we want to do is come and see. We're looking to engage an architect that's got some broader experience in this area, that we can come back with some concepts to the committee that'll include some of those points that you make, as well as make it as usable as possible, right? So we know it gets a lot of use, this area. So, and then also possibly we may have still the 2 washrooms. So how do we make this one maybe more universal accessible, and then keep the other block, update the other block so it provides some other uses. But all those points, Sarah, keep them, because when we come back, we'd love to make sure that we capture those in the design.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further hands. So we will move on next to accessibility issues related to snow and control. I don't believe Charlotte's here, and I think Mr. Thompson will introduce that. Or is she here? Oh, Charlotte is here. Introduced by Charlotte, please. Sorry, Charlotte, didn't see you there.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm here to have a discussion about snow and ice control. There isn't any presentation that's been put together, because what I really wanted to do was, I heard that there was some feedback to receive from the Accessibility and Inclusiveness Committee. So I just expect today to receive that and to answer any questions that you may have had about the latest snow and ice control season. And I'm also going to introduce Tony Clift, who is here, who is our trails supervisor and our supervised control supervisor. So just to kick things off, we may have some time to kick it off. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. This sounds weird to me.
Yes.
Tony has to turn his mic off.
Okay, try again, Charlotte.
Okay, that's better. So we may also have some representatives of Public Works joining us, because snow and ice control really is a conjoined effort across the city. In parks, we are responsible for snow removal and ice control from many key civic facilities, including the police station and fire stations, rec facilities and their parking lots, trails, much of the downtown. It's all about keeping business going, and also bike lanes. So I'm really interested to hear the feedback on how we performed this season and if there were any issues. I did hear of some, I think, relating to the NAC parking lot. And so I'm just here to listen and learn from you guys.
And I will just add that we do have Mr. Thompson here, who is the director or manager of Roads and Traffic Services. So he's listening, as well as he's got some other individuals with him. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you very much. As Ms. Davis said, there is no presentation for today. We're here primarily to listen and receive feedback from the committee. Likewise with parks, we have our road supervisor, Mr. Gary Davenport here. Tony and Gary are responsible for the day-to-day operations for snow and ice control. So they're the boots on the ground and making sure that our program is deployed as intended and directed by council and authorized through our budgets. So here to listen, answer any questions you might have, and move the program forward.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the committee. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas they would like to share? Rachel?
Hi, I'm sure we all have lots to say on this topic, so I'll try and keep it brief. But as I understand it, City of Nanaimo and RDN, blah, 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 they're all trying to encourage more pedestrians, more use of transit, less reliance on vehicles, especially as we move forward. So I think perhaps increasing the snow and ice removal budget to have more accessibility in the wintertime will fulfill a bunch of long-term goals. So I know it's expensive, but I'm going to say maybe it's worth increasing the budget perhaps more than you really want to, because it'll meet the goals of more pedestrian and more transit use in wintertime.
That would be something that goes to council, but appreciate that. Zinni are hearing that. Adrian?
I would say a hearty yes to everything that Rachel just said, and I'll just add a couple of things. So I know that it's only well, I mean, we just had snow, but you know, it's not 12 months a year that we're experiencing this type of weather. But when we do experience this type of weather, it does impact a large portion of the community. Not having that clearing and that ice management done does trap people in their homes. It traps people without a mode of transportation because they can't get easily to the bus stops. And it actually puts people out on the roads that are being cleared, you know, for cars. So in the case of my brother-in-law, he uses a mobility scooter, and he'll be trapped in his home whenever there's a snowfall. In my case, I grew up with arthritis, and I have you know, joint degeneration that is happening, is getting worse. And I also have a knee replacement that was done almost 15 years ago, and balance is still affected. So, I mean, it's affected on, you know, a bright sunny day. But when I'm outside and I have to self-correct every step along something that hasn't been cleared, or where the ice hasn't been taken care of, it traps me in my home as well, and it does hinder my mobility. And then just even being like, we live near downtown, we're a one-car family, and my husband works outdoors, and you know, walks to and from work, and then walks through the city working. And so all of those routes that a person would take when they're walking to work, going from like through their workday, going from business to business on foot, are impacted. And you know, there are people who are then walking on the road because they can't access the sidewalks, or they're you know, shoveling, and then the plow's going by, and they can't actually get out of their driveway. So and I should have started this with a thank you, because I know how much work it is. And I know how hard that you and the RDN are working together. I know how hard all of the different departments are working together, and I should have acknowledged that at the beginning. So it's constructive feedback, and I appreciate anything that you can do.
Thank you. Councillor Markman?
Thank you. And yeah, a favorite topic of ours is snow removal. And then we could go 5 years with no snow, right? In all reality, it's one thing to increase the budget, but what would the first priority or first gap that would be a quick fix? I can recollect that one of the things I used to get emails about was, okay, the road is cleared and I can cross the road, but then I have no access to the actual bus stop. For some reason, the bus stop is all, and when I drove around, I could see this, where even sometimes the sidewalks were actually somewhat cleared, but somehow around the actual bus stops, they were piles of snow, just the way it worked. But I'm wondering if you have any suggestions of what would be, if we increase the budget or we reprioritize the way we work it with the snow removal, what is an area that we could work on?
Rachel?
I read through your whole document with the new city plan, and the city identified different city centers. I believe there was 7, maybe there was 5.
Urban centers.
Yes, the urban centers, thank you. So there was the urban centers, and then there was, oh, I'm sorry, they weren't called neighborhood centers, were they? There was another
neighborhoods.
Yeah. So I would wonder if perhaps the urban center should be shoveled the first day, and then the neighborhood centers areas should be shoveled kind of the second day.
First is always emergency vehicles.
Of course. Okay,
and
excluding the obvious. Sorry, I didn't phrase
but
that
you're
well.
saying, I understand what you're saying is prioritize it in density, which we might already do.
Traffic.
Yeah. Pedestrian traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just going to add a couple things, having lived in the prairies and Toronto for many years, and my sisters, they're all in Calgary and in Minnesota, they don't even get sidewalk clearing or side street clearing anymore. We're one of the very few communities that still actually do street clearing. Many are going away from it, number one, because of the cost factor. if you say to increase the budget, but then we've got to get new equipment. And then we need to get the staff, because staff is a big issue, because you can't just throw anybody on a grader or a snow plow or the sidewalks. Businesses are the responsibility of businesses. You know, people are always upset that we're not finding the businesses, and that's been discussions that have been ongoing. But I do know, like in Calgary, Edmonton, you won't find many side streets ever plowed, and people don't even do their sidewalks anymore. It's just, there's even a court case that I was following, I believe it was in Nelson, I'll have to double check, where actually the people were fined for clearing their sidewalk, and it made it icier. So it's a catch-22, right, for people, like, not like it was a lawsuit against them. So those are things, but before I turned over to Mr. Sims, I just actually think that people got to remember, for this particular snowstorm, I think our crews did amazing work, because we had dumps of snow that we've never seen. They would just get the priority routes cleaned, and then we'd have another dump, so they'd have to go back to get that, because we'd have to get our ambulances and tow trucks and firemen and police to these areas. So one thing I know that they do in PEI is that they don't clear the side streets, but if an ambulance has to go in there, and I believe it's being done here, because I asked Mr. Sim this prior, if an ambulance needs to get into someplace, the ambulance must call, and they will divert a plow to clear the street to get them in. And when we heard complaints this year, when I checked into it further, the ambulance didn't call and request that. So I do want to thank staff, because I think they did a great job. Yeah, and I hear what people are saying that we can improve, but I think it was a one-off. Mr. Sims?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think really we all look at the last event and remember the challenges that we had, and we all, and our staff always think about how can we do things even better. And I think one of the things that both Rachel and Adrian brought up at Zenny is that we do provide some service to transit stops, but we recognize that we need to up our game on that one. So that's one of the things that we're taking into consideration. And I think my recollection was at the beginning of this whole discussion with the committee, there was the concern that in many parking lots, the snow is plowed into accessible parking areas or parking spaces. And I think that's something that certainly on the recreational facilities we take into consideration, but we also see that quite a bit in plazas. And I think, as Councillor Armstrong mentioned, this particular event just passed was one of the most severe that we've encountered in a long time. Extended cold and a ridiculous amount of snow.
Adrian?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I put my hand up again just to answer specifically the question that you asked, if I had priority areas, or if we did, and those were the two actually, just ensuring the access to the bus stops once people get there, so they can actually stand at the bus stop safely, because in some cases it is challenging. And the other was just taking note of where snow is piled, like the accessible parking spots being the prime example. But I'm sure there are others too, just within those parking areas, thinking through that lens of accessibility when the snow is piled.
Okay, Councillor Martman, and then we'll wrap up, because we've got 3 more things to get through. You're muted, Zenny.
Just really quickly, I think really we need to educate the public and businesses and everybody, and we need to start in September and tell the whole community that we want a snow plan for December and how we're all going to help each other. I think we need to educate.
Thank you. Okay, and thank you very much for everybody for joining us. Appreciate that. And I know I saw Mr. Thompson making notes, and I'm sure Charlotte was too. So I'm going to move on now to work plan priorities, to be introduced by Lynn Ward for Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Through the chair. When we were setting the agenda for this meeting, we thought to ourselves, holy smokes, we have a large work plan for 2022 and we only have 2 meetings left. And we thought that we were going to need to maybe work together to prioritize what you think is the most important, what are the most important items for us to cover in the last 2 meetings of this year. But now that I look at it, I see that in June we have accessible parking and accessible housing presentations coming to the committee. And we talked about the snow events today. So the outstanding items that are left for the final meeting, and don't forget, things emerge too and get added to the agenda that aren't on the work plan. But we have the guiding principles, reimagine, accessible programs and services that are provided through Parks, Recreation, and Culture. And we're still waiting to hear back on the gender diversity and inclusion recommendations. So given that our next agenda is probably already full, I just wonder if there are any of those remaining items that you feel would be really important to have on the final meeting of the year. So guiding principles, accessible programs and services at Parks, Recreation, and Culture are really the two only big outstanding ones left.
I think we haven't done a lot around diversity and gender. I would like to see more of that, but I'll turn it over to Sarah and then Zenny.
Thank you. Well, I noticed in my own sort of records of the work that I've been doing on that, that it was 1 year ago, actually this month, that this was first sort of brought forward, and that our committee put forward those recommendations to the City Council, which then, of course, wanted to look at the feasibility of that and deferred it to staff to look at that. So 12 months have gone by, which is a lot of time, and I understand there's time for bureaucracy, there's time for the, other priorities and so on. But I don't know that 12 months is, honestly, I don't know that that's a reasonable amount of time. It seems quite significant. And during this last year, what I noticed was that we didn't see action on the recommendations, which were recommended for a reason, because of course they haven't been brought back by staff to council for feasibility, to say this is what we figured out and we've assessed it, and these are what we think we can do, and this is what it would look like. So staff haven't done that, so council doesn't know. They haven't looked into the competency training or the inclusivity training, which left us this whole year with a council that's missing that. They're really missing it. And I know if you're a person in the dominant culture in the wider community who is cisgender, it's hard to notice that you have that privilege, or that you're not lacking it. For other folks in the gender diverse community who are transgender or non-binary, you notice it. And so what we haven't noticed is a positive change for the reasons that I just sort of went over. So after this year, I really would love to see some forward motion. I don't know how else to put that, but I'd love to hear that something's moving forward in some way.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you have any comment back, Lynn?
Well, as you were speaking, it was just occurring to me that maybe perhaps we could invite to the next meeting one of the staff members who's working on the next phase of what the staff thought should happen, which is the training, and just provide some sort of an update as to where things are at.
Thank you. And I just will add one other thing too. With the reimagine process that's been undertaken, a lot of our staff time has been devoted to that, which is normal, as well as the impacts of COVID still, that we lost, quite a few staff that were off or working from home. They didn't have access to stuff. Not that I'm trying to make excuses, because I agree with you. I think 12 months is a long time, but those are, I think, some of the explanations to put in there. Councillor Markman?
Thank you, and I agree with Sarah, and I would like to see us in that last meeting, that the gender and diversity, that be on the agenda. I'm just wondering with the principles, because reimagine is very important too. We're near the end of reimagine, and the input from the committee is valuable, but could some of this be like a homework, so that we would know what are the guiding principles that you want us to review, so people could be prepared and then come to the meeting, and we might be able to do both of those.
Sarah, do you have any reply to that?
No, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think that we were pretty clear in what we wanted, so myself, I don't think that we could give more direction to staff. I think the issue is we need to find out where they're at, and if there is a delay, let us know why there is a delay, so that we can understand, like, and if there's no reason, well, then I guess that's something we'll have to deal with. But I think it's really important that we do come back, because I think we've almost been 2 years with this committee. We mostly focus on accessibility issues. I found that, and I think we need to really start pushing more the diversity issues, like a small thing like the she/her, which we've heard about from other community members. I'm just going to talk really fast on this one thing. I participated in a public hearing survey today that's being done by the university, and one of the questions that was asked about, do you feel people that come from diverse backgrounds would feel comfortable at a public hearing, especially those that are from the LGBTQI+ community? And I said, I know that we're making inroads with our community, or our committee, but that is something that, you know, people may not be comfortable coming to a public hearing because they feel that they could be ridiculed or shamed, or they're just not comfortable. So I think we need to do more work on that to find out where we're at with that, with our community. Thank you. And then I see Adrian.
No, my hand wasn't actually up, but I completely support what Sarah said. I think that I would like to see a good portion of the last meeting devoted to that topic. It's not an either or, right? Like it's foundational.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further speakers, thank you, Ms. Ward. We'll go on to other business, which is introduced by Lara Clarkson, which is Accessibility Week. Turned over to you, Lara.
Thank you. Through the chair to the committee. You may remember we had a guest speaker from the province a few meetings ago that was speaking about the new legislation in BC, the Accessible BC legislation, where public sector organizations are going to be required to have an accessibility committee in the future. Well, apparently we're ahead of the curve here because we've got this committee up and running already. And so the other thing that's coming up is Accessibility Week at the end of May. This year it's May 29th to June 4th. And so some of us were thinking possibly with the endorsement of this committee and with your input that maybe we take that opportunity that week to celebrate or acknowledge this committee through maybe a press release and let the community know what we're doing. And so I thought we would just bring that up today as a topic for discussion and see what your thoughts are. And if you'd like the city and staff to do something to support Accessibility Week this year.
Adrian, I see your hand up.
No, that's a mouse.
Or is that a mouse? Well, there's a hand above your head.
It was Rachel.
No, it was ours. There you go. It was ours. Take it back. Thank you. Okay, and now I'm looking, does anybody have any comments on that? I'm not seeing any hands, but so I'll speak. I think that's a great idea because I do when I do I do like a 2-month recap of what's going on. I speak about what's happening at the committee, and I had lots of comments back that people didn't even know this committee existed. And I think there would be a lot of interest in the public to know what's happening. And like some of the small wins that we've had, and I'll go to the example that we heard from Mr. Harding about how, or not Mr. Harding, Mr. Harlow, how just cutting those trees like to 7 feet instead of 6 has made a big impact for those that are visually impaired. So I think we've got some small wins that I think would be really important to get out there, that because every little win helps, and when they see that it's not a costly change, which I believe most of the stuff done by this committee hasn't cost the city a lot of dollars, and it's made a big difference. And now I do see Rachel's hand. No, hey, yeah, it is Rachel's. Yeah. And then Zen.
I would be in support of the city advertising this committee because our term is up in October officially, but I believe our last meeting is September. So I think we need to get the word out that this committee exists so other community members can apply to join. Like our committee does not have very many men. Our committee does not have very many people of different genders. Our committee does not have any BIPOC members that I'm aware of. So I think there's lots of room for new people to join.
And
Councillor Markman.
And I love the idea. I think this is one of the best committees, honestly. the input we've received and some of the changes that we've made, I don't think we should be modest. I think that we should really celebrate our successes. And I think, yes, I don't think the city really knows enough about us. And I think we should be communicating to them loud and proud and strong. So yes, let's celebrate.
I think it would be important for some of the committee members to be interviewed about what made this committee work for them or what it didn't, whichever, just so that people could see, like for me, Zenny and I talk about every time we leave this meeting, we feel invigorated because everybody's so positive. I go to other committee meetings where it's all negativity. And this one, people really want to help us find solutions instead of saying you fix it. So we really do appreciate everybody that's on the committee and the time you give us. Ms. Bork?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to back up a step and find out if the committee is interested in making a motion or something around hearing back on the gender diversity and inclusion recommendations at either the next meeting or the one after that. Or do you feel that minuting that information is enough?
I think minuting that information is enough. I think that Legislative Services is sitting here and they're nodding, yes, they've got it. So that will be on our list and it'll be sent out to whatever the responsible manager is.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other further questions on that, let's move to our next one, which is not Sky, will be introduced by Ms. Robertson, which is option to return to in-person meetings, and I would go as far as to say a hybrid model. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to, as the committee has seen today, this is the first opportunity we've had with the new technology to accommodate an in-person / electronic meeting. And so what we just really wanted to do was gauge the committee's preference going forward, whether they wanted to retain fully electronic, whether you wanted to go fully in person, or whether you wanted to go hybrid. The only thing I would say with the hybrid would be that we would require the chair to be in attendance if we're going to have hybrid meetings. And also we would need to have you respond in each meeting as to how you would be participating, because the steno has to do some coordination with that. And we also have to ensure we have quorum, so we would know how many are coming in person and how many electronic. So it was really just to gauge the committee's preference moving forward as to the best model.
So I'm going to go to each individual and ask you for your thoughts. I will start by my screen, which is Richard Harlow.
All right. I fully support the hybrid method. I think it is kind of a good example to set for like the community. The fact that, you know, COVID is still a thing. There are still people that are high risk, and it does help improve access when we are literally making the meeting more accessible to people. For instance, I just got off work right at 4, so I wouldn't have been able to attend in person. I would have been late. But being able to have this online allows me to much more easily attend.
Thank you. We'll go to Adrian next.
I was walking up Wentworth Street for the first 10 minutes of this meeting, so I hear you, Richard. I fully support the hybrid model as well. On another committee I sit on, it's really interesting because there's been a lot of discussion around accessibility and Zoom, and how Zoom has made things more accessible in some ways and less accessible in other ways, depending on who you are and what your accessibility needs are. So I think it would be a great example for this committee to set.
Rachel?
I'm in favor of the hybrid model as well.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
I'll just keep it short and say, yeah, the hybrid model seems to be the most accessible and inclusive.
Thank you. Zenny?
Yep, hybrid.
Yeah, I'm a hybrid too, and then I can go with Ms. Robinson's got a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say with the hybrid, again, just the chair would need to be here in person for us to do that. And also, We, of course, follow the provincial health orders. I never know which TV to look at, sorry, everybody. And so at any point in the legislation and in our procedure bylaw allows for that, is that if something were to happen and new orders came in again, we would obviously go back to fully electronic meetings again, depending on how things progress. But from what I'm hearing, we would look to the hybrid, and then if something else happens, we'll certainly let you know.
Thank you. And I'll just explain the reason I do have my back to you is because my PTSD is bad today, so I have to be able to see the doors. So that's my disability. So I should have told you that. That's where I sit at council.
You're in good company. Don't worry.
Thank you. Well, all right. Thank you, everybody. There's nobody here for question period, so if we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilor Markman, her favorite thing. And seconded by Adrian. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Good to see everyone. Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Okay.
Bye, everybody. Good sharing, Cheryl.
Well, thank you, Zeddy, and thank you for reminding me about SFN.
Hey, no problem.